All right, hello. Welcome back. Chase Thomas Podcast, taping this on a Tuesday afternoon. Jeff Schultz, longtime Atlanta sports columnist, joins me, who I've been reading for so many years, not to age you, Jeff, but been reading you for a very long time. And I appreciate you making the time this afternoon to talk some college football and some NFL. But Jeff, how are you doing, sir?
I'm great. Thanks. And yeah, it's okay. I get a lot of comments like, yeah, my dad used to read you when he was a kid or something. So it's okay.
Hey.
I'm old. It's okay. I'm okay with that.
But it also means you're still writing and people love to read you and you still are going, right? It's good that different generations are reading you. That means you're good.
It is. And, I think part of that, and as the media industry has changed a lot since I started. I used to be on portable typewriters, and there was something called sort of this telecopier that was just sort of predated the fax machine. That's how you would get your stories in. And but so that's trying to keep up with that is something. But then sports is like the greatest reality show there is, and I think just the storylines tend to keep me going at this point. I could probably go the rest of my life without seeing an actual game. But just general storylines and things that build up to it and things that come off games, I think is kind of what keeps a lot of us going.
I like it. Well, what was interesting, like your columnists, opinions, and you're not a sham Sharania, Jeff. And over the last couple of weeks, it was like, oh, Jeff is breaking news, and you were in the news breaking business for a little bit. What was that like, being in the cycle of like what's going on with Willie Fritz and Georgia Tech, and who's gonna be the next coach of Georgia Tech? And you're kind of like, I imagine your phone was blowing up and your mentions on Twitter were blowing up about what's actually going on. What was it like for you to be in the news breaking business and just trying to keep all that straight and just follow along with what you were getting?
Well, most people in Atlanta only know me as a columnist, but
Right.
I mean, I worked for a long time in Los Angeles and San Francisco covering beats. I covered hockey and the Lakers and the LA Rams the first time they were in LA. And then I went up to the Bay Area and I covered the 49ers. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I broke a lot of stories. And that was that's like the big adrenaline rush in our industry. I mean, a lot of us in the whether late 70s, early 80s got into the field. We were sort of inspired by Watergate, and we want to go out to save the world, and we want to report, and we want to tell the truth. And so, really, reporting is as simple as just talking to people, really. And so, yeah, even though I do write columns in Atlanta and have for a while, I do try to bring a reporting element to it. It's very easy just to sit at your home and bang out your opinion and try to be funny or try to be loud. And unfortunately, there's a lot of that in our industry. But I think the people who can really make an impact are those who can bring a reporting element to it. And regarding the Georgia Tech situation, it was a very strange coaching search, I would say. And in the end, I mean, I don't like, I have no problem with Brent Key getting the job, really. I mean, everybody likes him personally. Obviously, players played hard for him. One thing I've always tried to do is not prejudge coaches, because we've all seen coaches that you want to run through a wall for, and they end up basically face planting. And then we've seen coaches who are kind of duds and they end up being the perfect choice. And so, I'm not prejudging Brent Key. I understand why he got the job in the end. Again, players liked him. He went 4-4 with a pretty much a physically and mentally wounded roster. He lost 2 quarterbacks. There was really nothing to play for per se, and he turned the guys around. So I get that. And I think it's a very cool story that this basically lifetime assistant coach and an offensive line coach and alum come back. Now, that's the easy part of it. The hard part of it is he clearly wasn't the first choice. Bill O'Brien of Alabama, I think they liked him a lot, but he wanted too much money. Jimmy Chadwell up in Coastal Carolina, I think they were very intrigued by him, but he wanted too much money. And Willie Fritz, even the day that I wrote that it was a quote unquote done deal, which is what a source had told me, the same source had told me they're really negotiating with Willie Fritz today. They want to get this done today.
Mm-hmm.
I can't remember what day it was, but they want to get it done today because there's this sort of like expedited timeline and panic that's gone through college football right now at the administrative level to try to get all this stuff done before the the transfer portal opens up.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a little excessive panic. That's just my viewpoint. But my point was they wanted to get it done with Willie Fritz. They wanted to get the news out there right away. And the unfortunate timing of it was Willie Fritz, who's coaching at Tulane, has sort of orchestrated this turnaround. They were in the AAC title game this past Saturday, and he did not want it to get out. I texted him that night, the night that they named the day they named Brent Key, or it was clear that Brent Key was going to get the job. I texted Willie Fritz. I didn't think he would text me back, but he did. I said, "Was this all about the financial guarantee?" Because I'd heard in the background that Texas would not guarantee that much money after what happened with Jeff Collins and the general financial state of the athletic department. And he said, he didn't deny that. He just said, "I don't want to get into that." But what he said was, "I just wanted to coach my team this Saturday." And so what became clear was he did not want the news to be announced until at least after the Saturday AAC game. I don't know if it went as far as Georgia Tech did not want him to coach in that game, but he certainly did not want him to he didn't want the news out. And so for whatever reason, Jay Bath, the athletic director, that wasn't good enough for him. And so he moved on to Brent Key. And again, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of good coaches who were not the first choices, but were the right choice. And at this point, we have to wait to see what kind of staff can he put together, what kind of schemes can he run, can he recruit is the biggest thing, and can he deal in the structure of coaching football at Georgia Tech, which is not an easy job at all.
If I'm a Tech fan, I'm concerned when you hear that like they could not afford Jamie Chadwell from Coastal and he gets $4 million a year from Liberty. Like, are they getting outbid by the Liberties of the world? Are there G5? Like, what is it just because of the Jeff Collins buyout and things will be better in a couple of years? Like, why are they in the kind of financial position athletically that they're in?
Well, in terms of why they're in the position, I wrote a huge deep dive on this about a year ago in The Athletic. If you Google probably my name, Georgia Tech and financials, or and Dan and Todd Stansberry, you'd find the story. But Georgia Tech, which is a tremendous university, obviously, is blessed with a lot of graduates who are CEOs of major companies. It's not like they don't have deep-pocketed donors; they do. The difference between the Georgia Tech donors, though, and the Alabama and Auburn and Florida, or maybe not Florida as much, Florida State, Tennessee donors is all those donors give to the football program. The Georgia Tech donors give to, I want my name on a library over here, or I want this, or academic scholarships. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's just, and Stanford is in the same situation on the West Coast. And so, so they don't have that revenue base. First of all, for the support programs and the recruiting, and now really with NIL, they don't have the major donors funneling money to various programs to pay players through NIL, and so that is one reason why Georgia Tech is in that situation and always will be. Jeff Collins had a huge buyout. He was given a 7-year contract, and we shouldn't get caught up necessarily in how much a guy is making per year or even the length of the contract. It's more about the guarantee of the contract. So think about it like an NFL contract. Player X gets a 5-year, $50 million contract, but only 30 million of that might be guaranteed. So Jamie Chadwell goes to Liberty, gets a 7-year contract for $4 million. I have not seen the contract, but I'm going to guess of that 7 years, at least maybe 4 or 5 is guaranteed, depending, barring, if you fired him, with just cause or something. So I think the situation with Brent Key versus maybe some of the other candidates wasn't so much the annual salary. I mean, look, it's not like you can't pay to get Willie Fritz. Willie Fritz was making $1.9 million at Tulane, so it's not like you can't pay him more at Georgia Tech. You can, but it's more about if you're willing to give him a 5- and 6-year contract, how much of that are you guaranteeing? I cannot as we're recording this today, tell you what Brent Key got, because that contract has not been released yet. For some reason, Georgia Tech is holding on to that right now, and technically they have 90 days to release it. That's another story for another podcast. But that is the short version of why they're in that situation here. And by the way, Georgia Tech also is in the toughest real estate in college football history geographically. I mean, you're in the middle of Georgia, Clemson, Auburn, Alabama, Tennessee. And here you have this, great academic institution in the middle of all that, but they're all coming in to get recruits. So it's very hard to build a wall around the state, or go 2 hours in each direction and just say, well, I'll just pull recruits from there, because all those other schools I just mentioned are coming in here too.
Yeah, it's like when Brent, and this is what he's supposed to say, and I'm seeing this a lot more around, like Kenny Dillingham was saying this at Arizona State, and a lot of them are like emphasizing reestablishing a good, healthy camaraderie with the high school coaches in the state. And you saw the reports that like the polling in the AJC of just high school coaches around the state wanted Brent Key to get the job. But it's like, okay, great, but it doesn't really matter what the high school coaches want. It's really what the players are looking at, because like I know a lot of these high school coaches in Georgia and Tennessee, but you talk to the kids, like they're not basing their their recruiting destination based on what their head coach feels about that particular program. So like they'll give them advice and things like that, but ultimately, especially right now in the last couple of years, NIL is a big part of this. And I don't think Heupel, like me being here in East Tennessee, or Kirby or anybody else, is shaking at Brent Key saying that we're going to reestablish our relationships in the state of Georgia. It's like, no, if we want to go into Colquitt, or we want to go into Carrollton now, who's apparently a juggernaut, Buford, wherever, like we're going to beat you for those guys. We're not worried. And the thing with Tech, and it's not a Brent Key thing. Paul Johnson kind of tapped into something where they're not a service academy, but I think Stanford's facing this. You mentioned them, where you're not going to have the players to play the kind of pro style that a lot of other programs can do, and you're going to have to pivot. And his triple option pivot, it won a lot of football games. It wasn't fun. It beat Georgia a couple times, but like if the NIL dollars are not coming in, the donors aren't shifting their focus from the academic buildings versus the football program, you have to pivot. You need to be an air raid team. You need to be a triple option team. That's why Jamie Chadwell made sense to me, where I was like, that's probably the best hire for them. If doing that kind of option offense, it's still fun, it's not fully triple option, I would have gone that route if I was Georgia Tech. I think they need to pivot, and I'm concerned that Brent Key is too much of we're going to build in strength, we're going to try and really get the same kind of players Georgia is, and we're going to play pro style, whatever. And I'm like, I don't think you can win at Tech like that way anymore. I think you have to be different.
I agree. I mean, I think if it wasn't going to be Jamie Chadwell, it could have been a Jeff Monken at Army, who was ready to tweak his offense a little bit, as evidenced by the fact he's gone for a couple other jobs the last couple of years. And or anybody really who runs some sort of spread or variation of the option offense. Paul Johnson, as much as he turned off a lot of people, is a really smart guy.
Yep.
And when he came to Georgia Tech, he knew the situation, and his philosophy was very simple. We can't run the same offense that a lot of our opponents are running and beat them with 2- and 3-star athletes when they have 4- and 5-star athletes. Yep. Now, personally, I'm not a huge recruiting guy. I think a lot of the star system is BS. I'll just put that out there. However, in general, there is something to the fact that better players are going to go to different programs, and Georgia Tech is going to get smaller linemen. They can still get some really good athletes and really good players. Don't get me wrong, but the players they are going to be able to recruit to Georgia Tech are not the same players they're going to be able to recruit at Auburn, Alabama, Georgia, every place else, Tennessee. And so it worked. He won a lot of games. He when he left here, he had the 4th most wins of any coach in program history. And the only 3 guys ahead of him, the stadium is named after him, the athletic fund is named after another guy, and the Heisman Trophy is named after the 3rd guy. Yeah. Those are the only 3 coaches at Georgia Tech who won more games than Paul Johnson.
That's amazing.
Which is, and so you have that there. Jeff Collins came in. He rubbed some people the wrong way because he never really acknowledged that success. and he tried to do it differently. And I totally get why. He brought a lot of positive things here in terms of marketing and branding and all that stuff. But in the end, he just wasn't a good enough football coach. And I tend to agree with you. Again, we'll see what Brent Key can do, but I think it's going to be a tough job.
Pivoting to UGA, Jeff, I've said all year I'm still betting on the field against UGA. Saban's won back-to-back titles once in his career at Alabama, and that's before the multi-game playoff system. They get a really tough draw. I think not getting TCU in one of the rounds is a bummer for Georgia, and they kind of got penalized because the committee did not want to do a rematch of Michigan-Ohio State in round one. I don't know if they lose to Ohio State, but getting Ohio State and Michigan back-to-back like this, with the kind of SEC schedule that they've played to this point, I'm still picking the field against Georgia. We'll see if that comes to be, and it's not an indictment on Georgia. Like, I still think they're the best team. That doesn't mean the best team always wins, and at a certain point, that's a lot of wins in a row, and you're in uncharted waters as a Georgia fan. But are you on the same plan? Are you thinking the same thing when it comes to Georgia in the season? Did you have them repeating before the year, and now that you've watched them for the full year, you feel good about it, or where are you at on that front?
Well, I wrote a column, I think it was around SEC Media Days or right before the season, that basically stated I actually couldn't understand why more people weren't talking about Georgia as a potential repeat team. Because I thought the offense would be really good. And then it showed that in the first game against Oregon, even though it fell off a little bit after that. I thought they could have some defensive issues early on and throughout because they were so young, but that by the end of the season, they could be really good. The defense will have come along. The offense would be better. The season didn't sort of play out exactly like I thought, but they ended up being a really good team. And so I thought they would be in the hunt. I thought they were certainly at least a potential playoff team. I'm with you on the fact that I wouldn't say I thought they would repeat or would be in this position right now from the standpoint that it's just really hard. It's really hard in sports, whether it's college or pro, to repeat. You have to stay healthy. You have to have a lot of things go right. Matchups have to be the same. Players have to be as motivated. I think the fact that even though there's a number of haters of him still out there, Stetson Bennett was really key for them. I mean, he was sort of their leader. He came back. His teammates loved him. And I'm not saying he's had a perfect season, but he's been really good. And the thing about this Georgia team is they have made plays when they've had to make plays. So they had hiccups, obviously, at Missouri and in a few other games. But when they've had to be great, they've been great. And you just saw what happened in the SEC title game, and they were great. They were dominant. Fast forwarding to this playoff game here, this is the one opponent they didn't want to play. I think they're going to win, largely because I don't think Ohio State's defense is very good. I think Michigan showed that. I think Maryland showed that the week before. I think there's been a couple other games when Ohio State's defense has been kind of shaky, but they're really good. They're going to have a little bit of a chip on their shoulder and want to make up for what happened at home against Michigan. And they have a quarterback who can make plays. This guy, I think, even though he didn't play last week, I think he still leads the nation in touchdown passes. He threw like 37 touchdown passes. Talking about CJ Stroud. They had, I believe, the second best offense in the nation this year, behind only your Vols in Tennessee.
People forget that. Well, the Heisman voters specifically forget that.
Yeah. And so, if this gets into a scoring race, anything's possible. This is almost could play out like the Rose Bowl a few years ago against Oklahoma. Who can beat who and what quarterback can make a play in the end? And that one went to, I think, double overtime, I want to say. So no, I think it could be a really great game, a fascinating game, a fun game to watch. Georgia would much have preferred for a more boring game to watch against TCU, but that's not the way it broke. And yeah, they have a much tougher matchup than Michigan did, and Michigan finished behind them. But that's just how it played out. And was it that the committee didn't want the rematch of Ohio State Michigan? Maybe. I think just as good an argument can be made that Ohio State shouldn't benefit so much by not playing in the Big Ten title game that not only do they jump from 5th to 4th, but they jump from 5th to 3rd over a team that lost by a field goal in overtime. Was it overtime? They lost by a field goal. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, yeah, in overtime. So I think there was a strong argument either way. It was a flawed system. On principle, I don't think a team that doesn't make the conference title game should even be in the discussion. But it's just,
that will change anyway because next year's it, and then everyone's making it anyway.
Exactly, everyone's making it anyway, right? So, and Clemson would have gotten a bye this year, if we had the 12 teams. So, there's always going to be, people are always going to be pick at the system. It is what it is, and that's fine. So, but I think it's going to be a good game. I would pick Georgia, but I think Ohio State's got a good shot. But
would you pick Georgia back to back? Would you pick Georgia to take the blow from Ohio State and then be like, what's your dessert? Oh, Michigan, who's arguably the second best team in the country anyway, and who pounded Ohio State a month prior. Like, I mean, that's just a lot. That's a lot.
Yeah. And it's hard to beat the same team twice.
Yep.
Right. We'll see. Let me get past this week. And then if you want to circle back and ask me via an email or text who I'm picking against Michigan, assuming they beat TCU and these guys beat Ohio State, I'll let you know who my pick is.
God, I can't believe I'm going to be this person, but I have to cheer hardcore for Michigan. It hurts my soul, but no one wants TCU Georgia in the final. Like, that is a disaster for the committee. And I think if you had to just be honest with them and behind closed doors, off the record, like if you could pick your best four, and I think the 4 best teams all year, and I think Hooker going down is the reason Bama finished in front of them in the final CFP. But like, the 4 best teams, I think, were Tennessee, Georgia, Michigan, and Ohio State. And if without Hooker, I think it's okay to slide in Alabama. And those games, they were like, man, if we could have gotten Michigan, Alabama in round 1 and Ohio State, Georgia, and then that's the final. And I mean, those would be, you're only looking competitive because these semifinal games have been so bad for so many years now that like, you're just terrified of putting a TCU in there. And it's like, they deserve it. The resume, no one's saying their resume doesn't mean it. It's just, there's a reason that they're 2-score dogs as an opener against a Blake Corumless Michigan, and Ohio State's, I think it's 6.5, 6 right now against Georgia, which was what it was for Tennessee when they beat Alabama a few months ago. So I don't know. I think it's within reach and within reason that Ohio State or Michigan could run the table here, but also TCU, they don't have a chance. And that upsets a lot of them, a lot of fans, where it's like, no, TCU cannot win the title. They're not beating Michigan and Georgia back to back. That's not a possibility. We can move past that one. You can't get by K-State. You're not getting by Georgia and Michigan in succession. It's not happening. What else I hope is not happening, Jeff, as we wrap up here? I'm wearing my Falcons hoodie this season, much like last year. It's been how can I phrase this? They're in every game. You go into every week assuming they're going to be in every game, and you just wish you could fast forward to the fourth quarter because you're like, all right, what's going to happen here? How is this going to wreck my Sunday afternoon? What are we going to do that
never seen before is going to happen?
Yeah, and they do it, and you're like, I don't know why I'm torturing myself this way. You look at the Mariota just time in the pocket, throwing super low, and Drake London's having to catch balls off his foot on mesh routes, and you're like, all right, how much more are we going to do of this? Like, what are we doing? At some point, we have to see what we have in Desmond Ridder, who I think is probably the best quarterback in this class, and this class is pretty bad. But you have to see, it looks like with Arthur Smith saying everything's on the table, this is where they're going. But the division's still in sight. Like, the Bucs had to do some crazy last 2-minute stuff to win last night against the Saints. Like, is it time for Ridder? Are you excited for this Falcons second half run? Where are you at?
Yeah, I'm. See, it's funny because everyone always brings up the playoff thing, and Arthur Smith himself has brought up the playoff thing, the division thing, I should say.
Yeah.
And, my viewpoint, certainly over the last 3-4 weeks, has been, okay, I get that. But I don't know that changing quarterbacks necessarily signals surrender. And I think as a head coach, my guess is, and I haven't talked to him about this, but reading between the lines, I think my guess is that's how he thinks people would perceive it. We're not going to win the division anyway, so let's just.
Which I don't think Falcons fans see it that way.
Yeah, I think there's an argument to be made that Marcus Mariota, I understand why he was in there. He does all the checks. He keeps you in games, to your point, but he doesn't win games. There's a reason why he's still Marcus Mariota. That what you lose with him, you gain something else with Desmond Ridder potentially. And clearly, and obviously, the other thing is you have to find out what you have from them, because once you get through this season, you've got a ton of cap space, and you're going to be going into year 3, and you have to make a decision after the season on whether you're going to draft another quarterback or whether you're going to trade for another quarterback or sign a quarterback in free agency. But you can't go into the season into next season without knowing what you have in Desmond Ridder. So the question became is, how many games do you or did you need to see him this year to make a strong evaluation? It's a question I asked before the season to Arthur Blank, to Arthur Smith, and the response kind of went viral because he went on one of his typical media narratives. You're just like all the Russian bots out there, and all. So it was actually kind of funny. And let me just go off on a quick tangent here. But like, people think with Arthur Smith, when that stuff happens, that like he hates me or I hate him. We get along really well. After the press conference, we were laughing about it, about that exchange. So back to this, I do think they're going to make a change. I would be, let me just say, I would be surprised if Desmond Ridder is not starting after the bye. And the difference is, while Arthur Smith did not come out and say after the game, which he wouldn't say right after the game, we're definitely making the change. It was the first time he left the door open. Okay. He had never done that before. In fact, not only had he not left the door open, he had slammed the door anytime somebody tried to open the door. And the other thing is, and I think he did this on the Monday press conference, he basically suggested the playoff race really isn't going to impact things anymore. So that whole mindset of, well, we can't make the change now because we're still in this thing, that's really kind of off the table right now. So I think he sort of has reached the same conclusion of, this guy, not only do we need to see what we have in Desmond Ridder, but he might give us just as good a chance to win as Marcus Mariota.
We'll see what happens there with Mariota down the stretch here, with Desmond Ridder. But I'm excited nonetheless. I want to see what we have in Desmond Ridder. I want to see where this thing goes. I want to see if he's a franchise guy, because they have a lot of questions heading into this offseason. But it should be fun after the bye. Jeff, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at The Athletic this week?
Well, right now I have a column on something we didn't talk about, which was Trae Young versus Nate McMillan and the Hawks. That was just
another rough loss. It's been great. Atlanta, Dansby Swanson's priced out of the Braves. You get the Falcons just killing our soul. Trae being Trae, which is... have you ever heard the poster versus reply guy argument, where there's posters and reply guys, right? Like, the posters are the leaders, and then the reply guys are the ones that, you don't want them leading your team, but he's just not that guy. I've said it he's just not, which is okay. He's like Kevin Durant. Like, they're just not going to be the leader. They can't. They're just not leaders.
Well, yeah. So you mean like Trae, you mean?
Yeah, Trae is just, he's James Harden. Yeah, there's a lot of Harden to him.
He's not like jump up on the table, lead a team meeting, climb my back kind of guys, but you can lead in other ways. And I think, and look, not everybody's a natural born leader. They're just not. And so that's fine. I'm not holding that against them.
Right.
I think the thing is, though, that, there needs to be an awareness and an accountability and an understanding of who you are and what you mean to the team and the organization and the franchise and the city.
Yeah.
And you need to carry yourself a certain way. I think that would be the biggest issue with him. There could be other guys in that locker room or any locker room who are going to be the ones who call a team meeting when things are going wrong, or who call out a teammate, or who say, hey, this is the way we do things. That doesn't have to be you. But you can still lead in other ways in your actions and on the court and the way you handle difficult situations. And there have been times when he has not handled difficult situations well. But anyway, so I have a column on that on The Athletic. I'm sure I'll be writing some things here coming up on Dansby.
The next coach of the Atlanta Hawks in January.
Yeah, no, I don't. I'll say this here, and you could play cold freeze takes here, if freezing cold takes if you want. I don't think Nate McMillan's going to get fired this year unless they lose like 10 out of 15 or fall way out of it or something. Yeah. I think after the season is a real possibility, but I think after the season anything would be on the table. Put it that way. I would be really surprised if they made a change in season like they did with Lloyd Pierce. Just my opinion.
You know what else I would like? Kevin Huerter to be on this team. That'd be nice. You know what'd be nice? Just Kevin Huerter in the rotation. That we're not having to figure out, should Justin Holiday be in it? Should AJ Griffin get more minutes like Jalen Johnson? What is he? Yeah, you know what'd be nice? It's just Kevin Huerter. Because like you see Bogey last night, and he's just incredible, getting all these great looks because there's so much to DeJounte and Trey. And
yeah,
I mean, it's just, what are we doing here? Like, are we trying to win a title? Are we not? This offseason says no. We're not. We're going to try and do a B+ effort and hope that it goes that way and enjoy it, Atlanta. That's where I'm at. I'm very frustrated because I think this team was close, and I think Kevin Huerter would be a big-time player with this group, and it would have been nice without Bogey for the first quarter of the season. Jeff, this has been great. Thank you so much for making the time this afternoon, and we'll have to check back in again soon.
Sounds good. Thanks, Trace.